Leatherface, or the Cannibal as he's known around these parts, is a character that is sorta hard to make an introduction for. I could mention how iconic this lad is and how nuts it is that he came to the game so early. I could talk about how he's had countless reworks and tweaks through the years. I could talk about how it's kinda wacky that we have two different chainsaw users in the same game so close to each other in release. I mean, I guess this is just a sneaky way to mention all those things at once, so forget what I said, making an introduction about Leatherface is easy. I put off buying the Cannibal for years. Why would I pay for a chainsaw character I felt I already had? Well, what I wasn't expecting was how much of his own can of beans Bubba was. If Hillbilly is about going very fast and hitting long shots, Bubba is about something I would have never expected, and that is pushing your luck and betting on your precision.
Come on, let me cut you a brownie while they're still hot.
Dad, I'm kind of edgy right now. I'd appreciate you not coming in my room screaming and brandishing a butcher knife.
Why? Oh, right. The thing. Oh, I'm sorry, boy. What, you want to see my new chainsaw and hockey mask?
The second licensed killer in Dead by Daylight was initially a bit of a rush job. If I remember correctly, the devs realized that they were going to have a window to get Leatherface, the character they based one of the original three on, in their game where you hang people on meat hooks, that has a basement as one of the most pivotal you fucked up zones for survivors, into their video game. That's an amazing opportunity, yeah? This game is kind of a love letter to Texas Chainsaw in a lot of ways already, but they had to work fast to get the boy in. Too fast. They had to do their best to get something made, and ended up with a character that, at first, was kind of just Hillbilly but with tiny tweaks. To the point where Bubba and Billy used to share most of their add-ons. They were effectively Coke and Pepsi. It took years, and I do mean years, for Cannibal to become something other than Billy, but he kinda curves and he gets angry when he hits something. And while the two of them still share a ton of DNA, Hillbilly went on to become an entirely different beast. So they are damn separate in my mind now. God, Hillbilly is fast. So, Bubba's main shtick is that he has a chainsaw. We've seen that before. Charge up and spring forward, right? Well, honestly, to explain the saw, I might need to try making as few comparisons to Hillbilly's charge as I can. Because Hillbilly is a Demo Knight distance-stretching speed machine with a super mode. Cannibal is a test-your-luck chaotic bull in a china shop with high control of his movement. You slow down a chunk while charging up. It takes very little time to charge, and you can feather the charge key if now isn't the perfect time. But watch out, because even if it doesn't take long to charge, it also doesn't take long to overheat and flip the fuck out, so watch yourself. When you do go into a sweep, you don't actually sprint forward. What actually happens is, as you continue to sweep, you slowly gain movement speed up to 5.35 meters a second. All things considered, that's pretty fast. You aren't going to be able to hit people in the very distance, but if you start up kinda mid-range toward people, you can usually catch up with them by the end of your tokens. And if you hit them, that's an insta-down, baby. Oh yeah, I should mention you technically have 3 chainsaw charges. This is my favorite part of this kit. When you fully charge up, you instantly use up a token. Your first sweep will always be 2.5 seconds long. That's not a ton, but it's enough to slam into someone who's very close range. The magic happens when you use your other tokens. At any time during your sweep, you can press your ability key to use up a chainsaw token and reset your ability's duration, meaning that you can keep on sweeping. This leads to you sort of playing a rhythm game with your own ability, trying to push it to the very last millisecond before you inject a token and go back to full. Your attention is going to be divided between trying to chase someone and managing your tokens. On top of this, for every token you use, you incur a higher come-down animation when you finish a charge without hitting anyone. So not only are you sort of doing a push-your-luck thing with your chainsaw token timing, you're also putting faith in your ability to catch a survivor with all those invested tokens. Like, should I use all 3 tokens and risk getting winded for longer? Or do I want to cut my losses and catch up after taking a breather? It really makes you bet on yourself, and I like that. Tokens come back pretty quickly. So after getting winded, you can probably do a simple one-time charge after, but to get a full charge, you're gonna have to wait a tad longer. It's not at all that punishing, but it keeps you from staying in Saw mode for, like, all of time. When sweeping, you have almost perfect movement control. It still feels a little slippery, but I can't tell if they actually truncate your movement at all, or if it's just the feeling of constantly speeding up making it feel that way. Any direction you move is one with a feeling of momentum, as you just keep getting faster. But despite this, you can legitimately stop on a dime. You can backpedal, juke, do whole loops, mind game, all while swinging your saw around. Hell, when you slam into a breakable object, you break it in a second half and skip your own winded animation. Cherry on top of all this, you don't stop your charge when you hit someone. If you have any duration left in your sweep, you can pierce through one survivor and bump into another. Sounds pretty powerful, right? Well, there is one thing keeping Leatherface in check, and that is that maneuvering with the Bubba Saw is still tricky. Because if you bump into something that isn't breakable or a survivor, you throw a tantrum. Tantrums happen when you charge your ability for too long without actually using it, and when you bump into something solid. It starts out pretty short, but if you use all your tokens, it's going to make your tantrum last longer and longer if it does get set off. Up to 3 seconds of doing your gay little dance. When throwing a fit, you are still lethal. Like, if a survivor is not thinking and touches your saw, then they will still go down, but you can barely move a muscle and can just slightly slide around. The only way to get out of this early, hilariously, is creeping up on a pallet or breakable wall in this state and falling into it. I just think that's funny. Obviously, 3 seconds of funny dance isn't the worst thing in the world, but aside from said dance, it also dumps all your tokens no matter how long your dance actually was, meaning you have to wait for them to come back after the full cooldown. This makes mistakes very punishing as Bubba, but not so punishing that it makes a chase unrecoverable. You just gotta be careful or you lose a lot of momentum. The only way that throwing a tantrum can be good for you as the killer is if a survivor is in a locker trying to avoid your insta-down powers. Like, Christ, how do you even deal with this? I mean, very carefully, yeah, but I have not had a survivor come into contact with one of my Bubba tantrums while hiding in the locker and survive. So yeah, that's basically all the mechanical stuff about Bubba. And on the surface, he's extremely simple. I mean, I would agree that he is simple mechanically, but I think that Bubba is more on the easy to pick up, hard to master end of the killer spectrum. Like, of course you can pick up the Cannibal and down a few people close range, but you might fall into a trap that a lot of Bubbas end up stumbling into. What differentiates a good Bub from a great Bub is the ability to know if and when to use your basic attack. Sometimes, if you can, a chainsaw charge can save you some time. But other times, you gotta know when to just get in with some normal damage and use your chainsaw to catch up for the second hit, rather than using it purely as a skipping health states device. The Bubba Saw is not really a traversal tool in the sense of getting you across the map in a quick fashion. It's way better as a chase option for becoming really dangerous in tight areas and playing catch-up with survivors that would have gotten away otherwise. Seriously, even if a survivor uses endurance to try cheesing you out of a hit, your saw will chew through 2 different health states one after another if you just keep on that player. No matter the state of a survivor, being on the receiving end of a chainsaw is bad news. When I use Bubba, I tend to not wait until I'm close to use my saw. More often than not, if I'm in a spot where I can effectively catch up to someone from where I'm standing, you damn well know I'm gonna rev up. The saw, at least in terms of how I use it, is best when someone is just on the other end of a loop or open area that would take ages if I wasn't playing funny Bubba. Again, you gotta take those swipes and lunges, but if you have a moment where you can bet on yourself, do it. You might just surprise yourself. It probably comes as no surprise that I am way better at Leatherface than I am at Hillbilly. Billy is so fast, and without my turning speed upgrades, I tend to not do so hot as him. But with Bubba, I tend to be very consistent. I think I just already know what good movement for loops feels like in muscle memory, so applying this to Bubba feels like playing a fast-paced version of one of those ring and metal pipe games. I don't know, what are those things called? Irritating stick? Some loops are gonna be easier than others, and of course, vaults will ruin your day if you are just getting too saw-minded. But thankfully, ways to play around those can be learned, or bypass if you use a perk like Bamboozle or Crowd Control. Also, just king of active area denial right here. If you're in a space with a Bubba and an important object, You have to respect that Bubba. I'm sorry, try again later. I love how goofy and chaotic playing Leatherface can feel. Like, I really am just slip-sliding around and bumbling into survivors with a chainsaw, aren't I? It makes me feel like the perfect middle ground between being a threat and being a total goofball. I swear to God, sometimes when I'm charging around as Cannibal, I just make stupid noises with my mouth. Like, in real life. Also, while he didn't exactly start out this way, playing Bubba in a way that feels haphazard and crazy is very cool. But on top of that, giving him mechanics around throwing a tantrum when he fucks up is just cherry on top. That is inspired. Chef's kiss. Bubba's perks are solid as hell. A lot of them are definitely not pleasant for survivors. Sure, no perk is exactly nice to the opposing team, but Bubba has some serious fuck yous for sale. Let's check them out.
A barbecue.
Barbecue and chili is the perfect pivot after a hook. Basically, when you hook anybody, you see the auras of survivors who are over 40 meters away from said hook for 5 seconds. This is an insane amount of information for a killer to get. It makes sense you have to hook someone to get it because, sheesh. You will know what survivors are up to even if they're a reasonable distance away. Are they healing each other? Are they working on a far-flung generator? Are they just kind of fucking around? No matter what these goobers are up to, you will know what they're doing at a glance. And even if you don't see someone in the mix, that's a lot of info too. That survivor is most likely within 40 meters of your location. The way this is set up means that you are going to be ping-ponging between important targets constantly, going from hook to hook and gaining new cursed insight each time, knowing what generators to guard and which ones not to sweat. Sure, distortion could fuck you up, but distortion fucks everything up. Like, it's a juggernaut. This isn't BBQ's fault. If you are confident in your ability to just get in there and get those hooks, put this on and be amazed at just how much info you are being fed.
Don't throw it on the ground!
Franklin's demise is very rude. There has been countless think pieces about this perk being unhealthy or straight up toxic, but like, I don't know man, sometimes the best course of action is slapping an important tool out of a survivor's hand. With this thing on, you do just that. Basic attacks force survivors to drop their item. On top of this, you can see dropped items within 32 meters, and said item will slowly lose its charge over a minute and a half. If a survivor doesn't go to pick up their item after being hooked, they will be left with a useless husk. This is an anti-most things tool depending on what you smacked from someone's mitts. It's anti-healing, it's anti-gen repair, it's anti-blind, it's anti-information. Seriously, if a survivor's game plan starts and stops at having a crazy good item, you can tell them to put that shit down. It's sort of an alternative to Lightborn as well, because, like, you can't beam me if you don't have a beamer, right? It doesn't slap killer-generated or perk-generated items, though. Only the official survivor consumables, so you can't just smack someone's syringe or flashbang. I was kinda lukewarm on this thing for a long-ass time, but after using it, I kinda got addicted to it. When I see a lineup of potentially great items, I am more often than not going to put this on. It just feels satisfying for your basic attacks to be rewarded in a way that isn't just damage. I get why a lot of survivors hate this thing. The possibility of bringing a strong tool with great add-ons and having it all just on the ground rotting is really frustrating. But what I would say to this is you'll find another. Sure, if it's your last ultra sparkly crazy anniversary instant orgasm toolbox, I get it. But also, like, you gotta know bringing any item is a risk, right? If you're that worried, don't use the limited edition stuff. You're totally allowed to just keep it. Also, pro tip, don't try to take your item back in the middle of a chase. Do what this guy did and pick up another person's item to use as the killer is occupied. That is genuinely crafty. I haven't seen anyone do something like that before.
I ought to knock your block off, you little freak.
What?
Knockout is completely fucked. Okay, so I don't usually keep people on the ground for long. I like to go right for a hook when I down someone. I don't even want a chance for Unbreakable, Flip-Flop, or for the people to ruin my day. I just face a wall to avoid flashlights and go for it. That said, sometimes if someone is lined up with a pallet and it's completely obvious someone else is nearby, I usually have to slug them a bit and check around just to make sure. This perk is specifically made to make slugging people and keeping them there way easier, which in one breath is super interesting, and in another enables some real evil plays. When you slam someone with a basic attack and put them in the dying state, said person's usually built-in aura gets suppressed. Only people fairly close by can see that human now. On top of this, for 15 seconds, a quarter of a damn minute, you reduce the survivor's field of view, give them the blindness status effect, make them crawl 50% slower, make them recover 25% slower, and, well, I'm getting a little emotional just thinking about it, but... Unless I make a video about Survivor mechanics, this is the very last time I will be able to talk about Deafened. Godspeed, you semi-used maverick. Anywho, this makes getting up after being knocked down way harder. You reverse Chumbawamba them. This is great for if you know a troublemaker is nearby and you have to deal with them real quick. I don't really have much use for it because I tend to rush hooks so often, but I gotta say, this makes those rare moments I have to tell someone wait right here way easier for me to deal with. Bubba saw add-on time, hope you like mechanical instruments and lubricant. These two thingamajigs make tantrums a chunk slower. Chomping 0.5 off of 3 seconds doesn't sound like much, but in the heat of the moment, if you end up fucking up, you will be happy you had this. Sure, it's room taken up to soften a possible mistake instead of room used to capitalize on your successes, but hey, even if you're confident in your abilities, still try to use this sometimes, cause not everyone is perfect and sometimes you might mess up and this will save you some time. Also, this makes mind gaming people at lockers way easier. No one expects you to snap out of it so quickly. Like, if you bump into a locker with one token, you are going to have a hilariously tiny tantrum.
I am fully charged!
Power recharge is a nice thing to improve. Sure, your base time for soaking tokens is not that horrible, but making that cooldown shorter leads to getting to full stacks quicker, meaning that you can end a 3-token long sweep and be up and ready for another within moments. Plus, if you fuck up and bonk, your tokens will come back way sooner. Overall, super reliable add-ons. You won't regret taking them. I have very little to say. It does what it says on the tin and does it extremely well.
This isn't working.
Speed Limiter does to Bubba what it used to do to Hillbilly, which is make your saw only take 1 health state. Man, it feels so deflating to have a challenge add-on that isn't especially interesting after several bangers. Going from Scratched Mirror and Scarred Hand to this thing is like listening to 2 Run the Jewels records before listening to an Insane Clown Posse album.
Give me the juice.
So, what this add-on does is a little confusing. Cooldown? I thought we already have an add-on that makes cooldowns better, right? Well, yeah, sorta. This one is just weirdly worded. It actually affects your winded animation, making it a tad faster so you can go back to chasing. If a survivor is just out of your range and you go tired mode, you can come to way quicker and still give them a quick slap. This isn't the most pivotal of stats to mess with, but I feel like the sheer amount of times I have caught someone off guard with this oil has been worth it. The Chili used to really, truly rule the world in Bubba builds, but after his recent buff, it's more in line with everything else. Chili makes your chainsaw extensions longer, meaning if you use a token, you'll have a slightly longer sweep than if you didn't have the Chili. This can make what would be an out-of-range survivor completely reachable. As a byproduct of this also makes your window for using a token slightly longer too, so you have a bit more leeway and a tiny bit more range. I would call this the perfect I don't know what to bring add-on. Just the best little ball of versatility in my book. The scratches and marks make your chainsaw charge up slower, but makes your movement while doing a chainsaw sweep faster. You will be giving up some close range lethality due to that charge time, but you will be given a lot more flexibility with how far you can be from someone and still hunt them down. Like, if someone is in a tight loop, and you can control yourself well enough, You can use your increased speed to make survivors really struggle to stay alive. Granted, the extra speed is a bit chaotic to keep a hold of, but it still ramps up as usual, and if you get used to that rising momentum, this is one of the best options for making survivors unsafe from mid-range.
Take it easy.
These things make the time you can rev up before having a tantrum longer, meaning you can feather the charge button a bit more before freaking out. Why would you do this? Well, sometimes you think you're in a good position and you really aren't, but you're about to be in a good position for a saw very soon. These add-ons make edging the saw's charge bar until that moment actually consistent. And frankly, a Bubba revving his chainsaw over and over is pretty intimidating. Added points for flavor, let's say.
I spill my drink.
But grind chains force people to drop their items when you chainsaw them, like with Franklin's, but for your special attack. It doesn't sap the charges out of said item when it's on the ground, but it does mean that survivor is not going to have that item on hand when you're done with them. And heck, not every survivor can memorize where they were downed, so they might just not have it for a chunk of the trial. You can make this really funny by bringing item-based perks like Hoarder to become a fucked up equipable protector. But even on its own, this is a fantastic option for if you see a ton of items you don't want to deal with, but also have a build you don't want to slot Franklin's demise into.
I seem to be wounded, but...
So, Mangled has a timer on it now. This is somewhat recent as of the making of this video, and it means you can either wait it out or heal through it as a survivor. This effectively makes it a sort of lower level version of Broken, a status effect we will go over real soon. But I would argue it still has a pretty firm place as the survivor time waster status effect. You could wait an absurd amount of time for this to wear off, or you could just heal slowly like normal. Either way, you are either not getting healed, or you are healing slow. For Cannibal, this means that, at least for a chunk of time, a lot fewer survivors will be doing generators, and a lot more will be trying to heal each other through the status effect. This gives you just enough time to walk up to him and, hey, your chainsaw can deal with 2 people huddled up real close just fine.
I can't stop drinking oil.
Shop Lubricant is a less insane version of Knockout, making it so that if you knock a survivor with your saw and no one is in your terror radius, said person's aura is blocked for everyone else. Meaning that if you take someone down with, let's say, undetectable, nobody is in your terror radius, so nobody sees it. It's kind of fun to keep survivors you downed hidden for a while, but again, I just pick up people too quickly to get any sort of value out of this. This can be sufficiently confusing if played around with, though.
He could go all the way.
Depth Gauge Rake is hands down my favorite Cannibal add-on. It tweaks some things to be out of your favor, but gives you quite a boon in return. First of all, it makes your charge up time way longer. Like, if you felt Beast Marks was a bit of a slow charge, you haven't seen nothing yet. On top of this, your chainsaw sweeps are just flat out slower. Not so hot. What this add-on gives you in return is a whole chainsaw token. That means you can start up your saw, get swinging, and extend your sweep 3 goddamn times. So while you are covering ground slower than normal, you are also covering more ground. And this doesn't have to be just point A to point B. What I love doing with this add-on is just spaghettiing all over an obstruction and still getting a hit. I can loop someone several times and catch up to them without having to stop my power once. Some survivors have it in their head how long you can sweep, and even those survivors will be thrown off by you being able to just stay lethal longer. I love using this from a bit further away too. Even if I'm slower, I'm not that much slower, so I can usually get right up in people's faces in no time even if I'm a chunk of distance away. When I play Bubba, I tend to bring this thing in most of my games. It's just so fun to be able to just swing your shit around forever.
I should have been the one to fill your dark soul with light!
Light Chassis makes the time you spend revving up also time you're gaining information. Basically, if you're okay with using your funny saw to announce where you are at any given time, you can use this thing as a super loud scrying tool to find people. Sure, there are other, quieter ways of finding folks, but in terms of finding people who are hiding in a chase, this is one of the best options for Bubba if you want to locate them again or just see if they're still around. You can bring something like the grease to make yourself able to rev up for longer too, allowing yourself to easily track people before going into silly mode.
I must break you.
Alright, Broken. A status effect that doesn't just hinder healing, it prevents it entirely. For the duration that Broken is applied to a survivor, they will flat out not be able to heal back to full health. This is what I think separates Mangled from Broken. Mangled is for making survivors spend more time healing and less time doing other important shit. Broken is for making them have to do anything but healing, all while they are completely vulnerable to a killing blow. 90 seconds of no healing is brutal, and if you're good at actually hitting people with your saw, you can apply this really easily. Broken is good when playing Bubba because it leads to moments where you can catch up to someone on a generator and realize, wait, I don't even have to use my saw this time, I could just hit you with a big hammer. As far as fucked up status effects go, I think Broken is a very fun one. It's so powerful that even the killer can see it's affecting you. I wonder why you can't see other status effects as killer. That would be fun. I think people would realize how good blindness and exhaustion are if they could see it being applied to specific people.
I don't know what any of this shit is and I'm fucking scared.
Carburetor tuning guide is extremely strange. So, Bubba used to not have tokens and just had one long chainsaw sprint he would do no matter what you did. This add-on kinda makes your chainsaw work like it did before the rework. You also have a way longer sweep on top of that, as you get 0.5 seconds of sweepage added per token consumed. It also makes your dashes slower along with your chainsaw recharge rate. This gets rid of the push your luck style token usage you usually get from Bubba and instead replaces it with one big fat run that you can't moderate. You just go all in. It can be nice for pure distance, but kinda gets rid of a lot of your agency. If you're not at full tokens, you can still use your saw, it'll just be a shorter dash. The biggest upside to this add-on is the coverage you get. So if you like taking over a lot of ground with your saw and want something wacky, try this thing out. I would just watch out when sawing a breakable, cause it gets rid of all your tokens. Keep that in mind when you go big. Flesh. Iridescent flesh is a blast. Okay, so flat out, if you hit someone with your chainsaw, this flap of face will give you all of your tokens back. No questions asked. You can keep your chainsaw sprint going and going and going, as long as you have survivors to bump into. On top of this, you have total control of how many tokens you use. So if you don't want to use all of them, you don't have to. Just use enough.
But I'm not done yet!
It also makes it so your maximum tantrum length is always 3 seconds. So even if you are using an exorbitant amount of tokens, you won't have to worry about flipping out for an absurd amount of time. Plus, I mean, your base maximum cooldown on a missed sweep is 4.5 seconds. So if you're using a ton of tokens already, it's actually a bit faster to bump into something and trigger a tantrum. Only by 1.5 seconds, yeah, but that can be more than enough to lose a survivor. I love this thing. As far as obviously powerful iridescents go, this is one of the most rewarding for me. Getting an insta-down and being able to keep on trucking to another person is crazy. And on top of that, it makes chewing up endurance way easier because hitting someone with deep wound still counts as hitting them, meaning you get your tokens back all the same. I just love becoming a total menace with this thing. Highly recommend bringing perks that help you find gathered together survivors so that you can just go on huge tears. So there we have it. The second licensed killer ever in Dead by Doorknob. I feel like for having such a tumultuous development, the dude ended up in a pretty fun spot. He is both super beginner friendly and super rewarding for people who practice the hell out of him. He is not foolproof in the slightest, but that's why I like him. Playing him feels like threading several needles to get to someone, using your expert stumbling around with the chainsaw abilities to really cause chaos. Out of all the things Bubba could have been in Dead by Daylight, I'm glad he above all else is unique, which, given he started out as a straight-up clone, is pretty wild and exciting to say. I hope y'all have a good one, and I'll see you next time.